Hey there. Welcome to yet another episode of Surviving and Thriving, the Breaking Badass podcast. It's a podcast dedicated to survivors of child abuse, sexual abuse, and domestic abuse. I'm your host, Bridget. I am a generational cycle breaker. I share not only my personal journey, but yours as well. I offer guidance throughout this podcast and tips on how to navigate things from the family court system, building healthy relationships after trauma, and supporting our children. This is a space for healing, empowerment, and community, where your voice matters and your story is heard. In today's episode, we'll be discussing the intricate ways narcissists manipulate legal systems to retaliate against and control their victims. We'll also hear expert insights and real-world examples, including a high-profile case. But first, I want to share a bit about my own experience with legal abuse. Several years ago, I filed for a domestic violence protective order, and it took me years to work up the courage after leaving my abuser to do so. I was terrified. I'd been working for months with not only my therapist, but also with my domestic violence advocate and my co-parenting coach at the time. And when I had gotten up the courage, I walked to the courthouse, shaking the entire time, feeling like my stomach was in my throat. I wanted to vomit because I knew that the minute I did so, all hell was going to break loose. And I had surmounting amounts of evidence against my abuser. Stalking, cyber stalking, harassing, verbal, emotional abuse, physical abuse, even during the marriage that I had. However, the thing that I came to learn was because I had children and there was a custody order that was in place, my protective order was denied. But I was given a hearing. It gave me a bit of hope. I remember in the courtroom then, an assistant district attorney had approached me, was interested in all of the evidence that I had about cyber stalking, as well as I was being blackmailed. I was being blackmailed, and I was facing, well, quite a story of revenge porn. We later set a time to speak, and he gave me his card. Well, fast forward a few weeks. My abuser was served. He was served in the evening. The very next day, this was right before Thanksgiving, I had 2 deputy sheriffs come to my home. And the deputies were extremely kind to me. And one of them was already familiar with me due to her involvement in this case that had gone on for quite some time. Except this was really the first time that I had filed an actual protective order. I was the one that was finally fighting back, we'll say. And I was served with a retaliatory domestic violence protective order from my abuser, full of false allegations. And I, to my surprise, found myself falling to the ground because a judge granted him ex parte. And not only that, but the judge granted him, at that time, temporary custody of our children. The deputies were there not only to serve me, but to remove my children from my home. This moment where I hit rock bottom, I learned that a narcissist goes after the thing that you love the most. And for me, that's my children. And it always will be. Took my children with the deputies and myself, speaking to them, and an attorney that I had helping me from legal aid on the phone, nearly an hour, to reassure them that everything was going to be okay and mommy was going to fight really hard to get them back. And the very next day I was in court. It was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, you see. However, the judges had already left for the day and for the holiday. One of my best friends had driven me to the courthouse because I was incapable of driving. I was so frozen. But that was just the beginning of a taste of retaliatory legal action from my abuser. This was during COVID, and the case went on for many, many months due to multiple continuances, which I believe was a legal tactic and strategy in order to cause confusion with the district court judge. In the end, the judge granted both my protective order as well as my abuser's protective order against me for a year. He later used that as leverage to continue to try to have false allegations against me, falsified social media accounts, anything. All of it was unfounded, but I knew exactly what his ploy was. Now, legal abuse. It's also known as abusive litigation, abusive process, or malicious use of process. And it involves covert, institutionalized tactics of power and control. These tactics are typically used for retaliation. They can manifest in a plethora of ways. Common examples include making false reports to Child Protective Services, initiating custody battles, filing protection orders, or petitions for involuntary to mental health care facilities or institutions. Now, let's look at a high-profile example of legal abuse. The case of the pop singer Britney Spears. She had a 13-year conservatorship controlled by her father. And this exemplifies how legal systems can be manipulated to exert control over someone's life. After her public meltdown in 2007, Britney's father gained legal authority over her estate, her finances, publicity, and even her own medical decisions. Despite her efforts to resist, the overseers of her own life retaliated through the courts, resulting in even more surveillance of her, stricter routines, higher doses of medication. Britney's story is a reminder of how legal abuse can oppress and control individuals. Narcissists often exhibit selective empathy, resistance to perspective taking, and willful ignorance in response to criticism. These traits can stem from insecure attachment in early childhood or from being overvalued as a child. Now, regardless of the cause, narcissists act entitled to respect and admiration, often seeking out people who make them feel special by association. However, they also crave this feeling of superiority, which leads them to engage in covert and even overt manipulative behaviors when they feel threatened. Narcissists use various tactics to maintain control and avoid accountability. They often keep tabs on their victims through surveillance and manipulation. They enlist the help of what we call in psychology flying monkeys. They lie by omission, leaving out their contributions to conflicts and portraying their victims as irrational or unstable. The pathology that they give of their victims, the narcissist end up depicting them as perpetually angry types, hypersensitive, dramatic, irresponsible, which is only something they put out there to further justify their own pattern of behavior, their abusive actions. The silent treatment is another well-known and common tactic. This is a form of abuse, and it's used to pressure victims to doubt themselves and compromise their boundaries. In professional settings, narcissists may weaponize professionalism and respectability, maintaining this calm facade while at the same time discrediting their victims. If you've experienced one narcissist, you've likely experienced more than one. Narcissism is very common. Here's some practical tips. You've got to document everything. Keep detailed records of interactions, incidents, dates, times, witnesses. These things can even happen in your workplace. Keep emails. Seek legal advice. Consult with an attorney. Read up on your rights. Understand the inner workings of narcissistic abuse. If you understand the cycle of abuse, if you understand the power and control wheel and coercive control, you can have a better understanding of the individual that you are dealing with. Understand legal manipulation. Maintain your boundaries. Be clear and firm about your boundaries. Do not engage in any unnecessary communication with somebody that is narcissistic. Have a support system. Have a network. You want to surround yourself with supportive friends, family, a work environment that is lifting you up, not putting you down, and understands your situation and doesn't judge you for it. If people are judging you for what you are going through, they are not your people. So, questions that I often get asked. How can I recognize, Bridget, if I am being legally abused by a narcissist? Well, we always look at the patterns of behavior. At the end, what matters is the pattern of behavior. So we're going to look for false accusations, threats of legal action, and manipulation through institutional policies. If you're feeling constantly pressured, intimidated, afraid, alienated, these could be signs that you're being legally abused. Now, another question that I get when I respond to this one, well, what do I do if I am a victim of legal abuse? You want to document all of your interactions. Again, looking for advice, going to your support network, speak to a mental health care professional. There is a tremendous toll that narcissistic abuse takes on our body. The amount of individuals that experience narcissistic abuse and are later diagnosed with PTSD, complex trauma, anxiety, depression is quite high. Having a mental health care professional who supports you and understands is highly recommended. Thank you for joining me today on this episode. Legal abuse by narcissists is deeply troubling. It's an issue that affects many people. By understanding their tactics and taking a proactive approach, we can protect ourselves and support others who may be going through similar experiences. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with others. Leave us a review. And until next time, stay informed and stay safe. This is Bridget, signing off. Remember, knowledge is power, and together we can overcome even the most insidious forms of abuse. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Surviving and Thriving. Stay empowered.